So what you saw today was the installation of just one portion of continuous welded rail. As was mentioned earlier, traditional length of all rail in this country is 39 feet. Continuous welded rail is 10 times that, 390 feet. We've already done 387 miles. We've got to go up to 440 miles. The additional money that we've received for the Subway Action Plan has allowed us to double our effort. We will be going from what we projected to be 19 at half the amount up to almost 40 additional miles that we'll be able to do and be able to complete. So the entire system will be continuous welded rail. And as the governor mentioned, and Charlie Hall mentioned as well, there's a particular point at every joint when it was every 39 feet. That was a point of failure, not just for what it means for the rail car itself, the teeter-tottering that goes on while you're a passenger, where the lights flicker on and off. Those days are over with continuous welded rail. It'll be seamless all the way through. But it will also not have any interruptions to the signal system, which is so important. As I've described the problems with the signal system over time, it's not just the signals themselves. It's the track, it's the rail, it's the water, it's the trash. It's a combination of everything that interferes with the signal process. And so what I think is really important, our customers get to see this. We're thankful that we have the money to be able to do this. In addition, I want an opportunity to introduce some of the folks. Sally Libera runs the subway system, the Chief Operating Officer of Transit, Frank Giesecke, our good friend Charlie Hall, who's involved in all of the effort to do this. Governor?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to thank Chairman Joe Lotto, who's doing a great job, and the entire team, Charlie Hall and Sally Libera and Frank Giesecke. What the Subway Action Plan funding now allows us to do is really get to work. We underfunded the subway system for 50, 60, 70 years. We have 50-year-old subway cars running. We have 100-year-old electric switches that are in the subway system. And people ask, well, why? Why didn't you maintain it? Why didn't you change these signals as they got old? The answer is it was a question of funding. And just the way people in their own homes tend to put maintenance last, government put maintenance last. And it was a question of money. We didn't want to raise tolls. We didn't want to raise fares. So we sacrificed the maintenance and the upgrade of the system. You then hit a critical point where the system starts to degrade. And 100-year-old switches fail. Surprise, surprise. And 50-year-old cars fail. Surprise, surprise. We developed a Subway Action Plan last year with Chairman Joe Lotto's leadership. It required $869 million to do short-term emergency repairs. We couldn't even get that funded. And we spent over a year fighting for funding for the Subway Action Plan. In the past state budget, the state budget requires that New York City pays its fair share. Tolls don't go up, fares don't go up. But now the Subway Action Plan is fully funded. And now we can get to work. And we've seen in the past few weeks, we've accelerated the car rehabilitation process, the signal rehabilitation process, and the track rehabilitation process. What you're seeing now, as you've heard, is fixing the joints that are every 39 feet. That's the way the system was built. It was built with a 39-foot length of rail. Over the years, the gap between those rails gets bigger, the alignment gets worse, the disruption as the wheels go over that bump get worse. It's uncomfortable for the riders, but it's actually worse for the equipment. It degrades the equipment, and most significantly, it can trigger what we call a false red signal. You have that disruption, the system detects a disruption, it turns the signal red. When the signal turns red, everything stops, and that train stops. When that train stops, the train behind it stops, the train behind it stops, and the train behind it stops. And as safety is the first concern, you can't move that train until you diagnose the problem, which means a team has to come out, go through the whole train, and determine what happened, and determine if, whether or not that joint caused the disruption that caused the signal to go to red. What this does, let me finish, and then you can always talk. Also, if you notice, as a sign of courtesy to your sensitivity, we did not invite you on the track this time, so I don't get criticized for endangering the lives of reporters. So every 39 feet you have those welds. This system connects the welds, smooths them out. We now have a continuous welded rail for 390 feet before you have a joint. This should have been done all along. Why wasn't it done all along? Because the MTA didn't have the money to do it. It keeps coming back to the money. It is personnel intensive, as you saw. The system is tremendous. MTA didn't have the money to do this work. MTA also didn't have the money to purchase better welding equipment, which is expensive, but which will save money in the long term, which is an electric weld. Rather than igniting gunpowder and steel and having it melt and then bang away the excess and grind and file, an electric welding machine will be much faster, much safer, less personnel, but you have to buy the electric welders. The subway action plan will allow us to do that. We were at the Tappan Zee Bridge yesterday, and it's the same lesson over and over and over. Tappan Zee Bridge, for 20 years, it caused delays, it caused traffic, it was very expensive to maintain, but we, quote unquote, society, didn't want to invest in a new bridge. So we suffered delays, we suffered commuters' anguish, we spent a lot of money to keep the old bridge up. It was all a waste. We should have been more long-sighted, and we should have said, let's build a new bridge. In the long term, it is cheaper. But for 20 years, we didn't do it. We didn't learn the lesson that at one point, it costs less to actually spend more and make the improvements. And that's the same story with the MTA. The subway action plan, together with congestion pricing, is the metaphor for the new Tappan Zee. Do it right. Do it right. It will be faster, it will be cheaper in the long term, but you have to invest early on. We now have a new Tappan Zee Bridge that is being built. It's on time, it's on budget. Once we decide to do it, we can do it. The trick is getting the political will to make the decision to do it. My father, God rest his soul, used to talk about Aristotle's formula for success, which I really don't believe it was Aristotle's formula for success, but I think he said that to give it greater credibility. He said there were 2 steps, 1 caveat. Marshall will remember this. Step 1 is decide what you want to do. Step 2 is do it. The caveat is step 1 is very difficult, deciding what you want to do. We didn't decide what to do on the Tappan Zee Bridge for 20 years. We didn't decide what to do on the MTA for 50, 60, 70 years. Decide what you want to do. We need to improve the system. We need to invest. We need to improve on it dramatically. We have now decided that we're going to do it. That's the subway action plan funding, and that's congestion pricing. Now do it. We have the personnel, we have the expertise, we have the ability, we're now doing it. The caveat was the difficult point. Getting the funding and getting the commitment and the political will to actually make the changes. Any questions on this for myself, Chairman Loader?